Berlin-Ichthyosaur. The last person in gets the pleasure of shutting the door, please.
They're at the restroom.
Okay.
At the pleasure of the
So
restroom.
if you guys could come up to the display case here, please. All right. So icky means fish, and a saur means lizard. So what you're looking at is a big fish lizard. It is, again, classified as a marine reptile, not a mammal. So I always ask everybody what this looks like. 9 times out of 10, they'll guess a porpoise or a dolphin. But think about the bone structure. Dolphins swim vertically. These guys swim horizontally, side to side. Dolphins had a blowhole. These guys have nostrils. All right, so they are air breathing. All right. They also gave live birth. Most reptiles lay eggs. These guys adapted to the ability to give live birth. So the term for a reptile that gives live birth is viviparous. These are viviparous reptiles. All right. Sometimes our rattlesnakes in this region can be viviparous. It's kind of weird, but they do give live birth. And we know that they gave live birth because we actually found a pregnant female. Here's the pelvic region of this animal, and these are all babies inside. All right, so she would give birth like a large pit bull or a lab, perfect timing. All right, but each one of her babies when it was born was about 6 feet long. All right, remember the average length of an ichthyosaur is only 6 to 12 feet. Now, we were talking a little bit about the coastline of Pangaea, so I just want to give you guys a visual. All right, you can kind of see how the globes, we predict that it's changed over time. All right, you guys see that? Now, I'm going to show you this right here. This is what we believe that our region was doing at that time. All right, so you guys were kind of asking about it. The coastline went all the way up. Again, right there where that little dot is, that is where we're standing today. Now, this article was dated back in the mid-'80s, so about 36 years ago. That is everywhere they had found a ichthyosaur 36 years ago. It is so common for us to find them now. If we were looking at this in 2023, all right, this whole coastline would be completely covered. All right. So again, we're not doing any new excavation. Everything we wanted to get from this particular group, we've already got. We've known about ichthyosaurs for the last 100 years. If you went to Europe, you would find them and they'd be 100% intact, but they're only 6 to 12 feet. All right, compared to these guys that range from 30 to 70.
Do you figure out what made them big, or what was?
That's a great question. So, these are all your Jurassic ichthyosaurs right here, and all your Triassic ichthyosaurs. We have been taught that all life started in the ocean and progressed to land. We actually believe that these guys went the opposite way, that they were land-based reptiles that entered the ocean due to a better food source and eventually lost the ability to exit the water. So as time goes on, they became more adapted and more aquatic to the marine life than being these giant reptiles. And that's when we start seeing them about 6 to 12 feet in length. So they expanded, they went from the Jurassic to your Cretaceous period, so 95 to 220 million years. They're the only reptile to almost encounter the whole Mesozoic era. Highly, highly adaptable creatures. And they've been found on every continent except for Antarctica. So basically, we believe that they just became more streamlined, more fish-like as time went on, and that kind of stuff. Now, these guys also did not have sonar like whales and dolphins, so I was talking about the eye socket. Largest eye on any living organism that we know of today. About 1 foot in diameter. So about the size of a dinner plate. All right. Now, they did have special lenses on their eyes because of the depths that they could dive. So they didn't pop out of the water like a scuba diver that came up too quick. All right. But incredible eyesight. They relied solely on sight. Now, we believe that these guys mainly fed on ammonites. They look like a giant snail, but they're more like a nautiloid. They're a free-swimming creature. and they would range from the size of a penny to bigger than a semi-tire. So you guys can pass that around. All right. If you look off to your right, you'll actually see another ammonite right there. That was actually found in Baja, California in 1973. If you wanted to find an ammonite like that in this area, the closest place that I know of is probably the Grand Canyon. All right, most of the ones we find here are about the size of a quarter. So you're talking about a 30 to 70 foot animal. Think about how many ammonites this guy is eating, right? So this is probably the most distinctive bones that you guys are going to recognize today are the backbone. And this is the vertebrae of an ichthyosaur. So you guys can pass that around. Please be careful with it. It's kind of heavy. It's got some Gorilla Glue because somebody dropped it years ago. All right.
Pretty heavy, yeah.
And then if you guys look in the case right here, all right, this guy was actually found up in Lovelock. He is in the Carson City Museum. Thank you. And that is this guy that you see right here. This eel-looking one right here. So we are finding them just everywhere. I wish I could find a gold nugget like I could find the ichthyosaur. We're gonna see 7 to 9 of them today. We know a total of 37, and we estimate that there's over 100 just in the 1,500 acres. That's probably close to over 500 today. That number was from about 12 years ago. So yeah, we do find them everywhere. Well, you'll probably find them in the campground out there. It gets done raining today. All right. So are you guys ready to check them out? I'm going to have you guys walk up the staircase, please, and we'll get started on animal number 1. Yes.
That's like half of it. Yeah. Oh, look at that little guy.
Yeah, well, all over the world, I don't know. In the area, yes. But we'll go over that here in a second here. All right, so when we look at their skulls, they're typically in very poor condition. Their skulls have a lot of cartilage in them, just like ours do. All right, so when they fossilize, they're in very bad shape. So A is the head on animal number 1. Here's the tip of the beak or the snout. It's completely folded backwards. It should go actually to the center of this limestone and then right back in. You can actually see the striations that they dug for it. They didn't find it until they came back up in here. So imagine standing on a crocodile or an alligator and ripping its jaw apart. That's essentially what happened here. Now, in today's world, these guys would probably be closely related to a crocodile and an alligator due to the fact that they are reptiles, but they do resemble a porpoise or a dolphin. Now, B is the coracoid on this guy. Basically, it's what holds our front arms, or at this point, the flippers together. But you go right up here, and that is the first flipper. And you go up here, and you're missing all the digits of the flipper. So all the phalange bones are completely gone. All right. The earlier ichthyosaurs had more of a hand, like we do. The later ones, it was more rounded off and more padded. All right. So you go through the second flipper right here, same thing. You're missing all the digits of the flipper, so all the phalange bones. Then you have that huge crack in the ground. That is a fault, and when that fault occurred, it shifted this animal and basically cut him in half like a stick of butter. There are a lot of faults in this quarry, so that's why it's kind of a mess. All right, so the rib cage is actually right up in here. The rest of those ribs actually ended up right down in here. Now the backbone going all the way up through D, all the way into E. E is the pelvic region of this animal. From there to about right there is all tail. That tail section should end up to about that third column right there. This is the one that we are representing outside on the wall to be about 54 to 56 feet. All right, and 30 years ago, it was the largest ichthyosaur known to man. Now, animal number 2, all we have of animal number 2 is just this short span of vertebrae. But based on the size of the vertebrae, we do know that this is a second animal, all right? And it would actually be overlapping animal number 1. Originally, Dr. Camp theorized that these guys might have beached themselves like whales and dolphins do today. But had that happen, you would see one over here, and one over here, not overlapping. So we now know that this was an underwater event that took place, all right? And that these guys got trapped in some sort of crevice or a ravine, and basically a mudslide came right over the top of them, all right? Now, we were talking briefly, I was asked, why are there so many in one location? All right. It is very unusual for an apex predator to have a bunch of friends with them. However, I do believe that these guys were social. All right. Because anywhere we have found one, at least in this area, we have found multiples. All right. So we uncover one, there's like 5 or 6 with them. The interesting thing about this quarry is there's no juveniles in this quarry to speak of except X. So they theorized that this might have been a breeding ground. They congregated in this area for breeding purposes. The conditions were right, and then they just met their demise. All right. We believe that these guys came into an area abundant with red tide. And what red tide will do is it will plug the gills on a fish, like an ammonite. I told you these guys have lungs, so they're not affected in that sense, but we believe that they were feeding on all the ammonites and then basically digested the red tide and got food poisoning. So when they did this excavation, this area was abundant with ammonites. And when I say abundant, I mean abundant with ammonites. And they didn't really care about the invertebrates, so they were actually just discarding them over the hillside. All right. Later on, that's a great area to go right over there and look for ammonites. But yeah, we believe that they got abundant with red tide and then basically met their demise. Now, the other quarries throughout the park that are not on public display, it's kind of the same thing. There's a pile of them. So we also wonder if they could have been kind of like elephants or other creatures that went to a certain place to die. But those are a couple of the theories. But we do know today that they did not beach themselves. Now, if you guys walk down the railing here, we'll talk about animal number 3. Where I stand, I'm probably 30 to 40 feet below ground on the original dig. We believe if we dug all the way under this walkway and right where you guys are standing, we'd find an intact tail right here. The problem was the excavation took place in 1954, and they were simply just digging in other areas of the park, and they did not expose this. But they did uncover J, which is nice. J are your femur bones, largest bone in your body. And then that tail section would continue under this walkway, outside this wall right here, and probably towards the hillside, if it was completely intact. Now, you guys notice how all the vertebrae are just kind of like scattered throughout this whole building? It looks like somebody picked them up and just threw them in here. Everything in this quarry is in the in situ formation. And what that means, it means it's been basically uncovered and left exactly how it's been found. Nothing in here has been reconstructed or placed here except X, and we'll talk about him later. The reason they left it in the in situ formation is they wanted to leave it like that for educational reasons. Most fossil exhibits that you go to, they'll have reconstructed all the bones and put them all back together. All right, and they would have cured them and done all that. So, imagine these guys died, they settled to the bottom of the ocean. Due to the pressure, what happens? All their bones just kind of collapse in on each other. Not to mention, you have a lot of activity with the fault lines and everything, so stuff has been kind of shifted around in the building. So, you have a bunch of vertebrae right in here, right? Right beneath those vertebrae is the rib cage. And you have a couple of mystery ribs right here, and we really don't know where those belong. And then that comes up into this area right here, and that is H and K. So if you guys walk down the railing, we'll talk about it. Good thing we're not standing outside, right? Yep. and then in like an hour, the sun's gonna pop out and it's gonna be beautiful. Yeah. Not no more. All right. So, right here on H, this is basically the back part of the shoulder girdle. It is really hard to make out if you don't have the trained eye for it. Basically, it's what holds our shoulder blade together. It would actually be this part of the animal right here. Then it's really hard to see, but that is actually a piece of the animal's lower jaw right there on animal number 3. All right, remember that would have been about 6 feet in length, average. This is probably the best one that we have on public display. Here's the beak or the snout. So there's its nose. Follow my green dot. You guys see that little indent right there? That is the eye socket. Again, about 1 foot in diameter. Largest eye on any living organism. All right, go to the back part of the neck here. Here's the hinge on the lower jaw. And that lower jaw would have been about 6 feet in length. Looks like another ichthyosaur punched him in the face. All right, now K is the same thing as H. It's the back part of the shoulder girdle. It actually wraps right around through here, right up through there, and then back in. Now, everything on that side of the quarry was above ground on the original dig and completely eroded away. All right, so that's why you're seeing a lot more fossil material on this side of the building, because it was under the dirt and it was protected by Mother Nature. So, there's a lot of speculation right here. All right, I'm going to tell you it is one animal. Some people will tell you it is 2 animals. It could be one animal and it's folded back on itself, or it could be 2 animals that are sandwiched together. All right, we know that this is a fault line going this way. We've argued the fact is there another fault going all the way up through here, all the way through K? And it either sandwiched 2 of them together or folded one in half. However, we all agree that O and N should not be that close together. Now, O is a coracoid, again, that's like a chest bone. N is a femur. That's also part of the femur right there. All right, then you have a bunch of ribs just in here and a bunch of scattered vertebrae. So he's basically a big Tootsie Roll. All right, now the last work done in the quarry was done in 1984, and they uncovered the head of one of these 2 animals, and it's why I personally believe it is only one animal. All right, right off this fault line right here, it slumped off and we found a head. So again, I think it's one animal, but some people will argue the fact that it could be 2. All right, the truth is there's a lot of fragments in this quarry. There could be up to a dozen in here. All right, and we're only identifying them as 7 to 9. All right, but that was the last work done in the quarry by Cy Mueller, and it was done in 1984. And Cy Mueller was a colleague of Dr. Camp's. Dr. Camp was the main paleontologist on this dig. Now, if you guys were out and about and you happen to stumble upon an ichthyosaur, believe it or not, it happens every year. This is what it would look like. Q and R are the only things in this quarry that have not been treated with the preservative. All right, so they're not that dark color you see over there. This is the natural color of the limestone deposits. All right, so basically we wanted to see how it would hold up compared to the rest of the quarry. Honestly, not much difference. But if they were exposed to the UVs outside, they would deteriorate within a couple of years probably. When we find fossils that are buried, they're so much better shape than the ones that are just laying on the surface. So you have a couple of vertebrae going up the hillside here, and then right into that rib cage. That is probably the most intact rib cage that I've seen in a long time. All right. And we just added this concrete in here to keep it from breaking down any worse. To give you guys an idea of how big that these guys were, we actually compare them to like a sperm whale or a blue whale today. So roughly about 40 to 60 tons. All right, so that is pretty big. This is another animal right here. We know that because based on the size of the vertebrae and the dimensions of the vertebrae. And that goes all the way up into S here. And then you see all these little flat rocks you want to take out on Lake Tahoe and skip. Digits of the flipper. So that is the only intact flipper that I have ever seen. those phalange bones disappear very easily, and it's very rare when we find them. Just kind of like teeth. We don't know how many teeth that they had, but what's interesting is they now believe that their teeth would regenerate like a shark. So if one fell out, another one would take its place. All right, so they didn't need dentures.
So based on that finding, how long were they
Based on like their
about?
flippers.
The phalange bones, how long were their finger-like things were?
It's kind of hard to determine that. They don't really know like a growth rate on them, and they don't know like a lifespan on them. So I personally don't know the answer to that question. I do have an article I can show you guys. Over time, like I said, how they became more rounded. But their claws were probably about that long, give or take. That's just an estimate.
So you think they used them to swipe food and stuff like that?
No, they would just open their mouth like a whale and basically swallow their food. They weren't grabbing their food. All right, now this is probably one of my favorite things in the quarry. There's another fault that occurred here. So when this fault occurred, it actually sheared off the rib cage and allowed us to see the cross section of the ribs. So you guys see all those dark circles right there? Those are all individual ribs. You guys see that? And then that's a rib bone right there, and then the rib cage is right up here. So yeah, basically kind of like getting an X-ray done.
Sure is.
And then that brings us to the discovery of the day, right up here. You guys walk around, but make sure you guys check that out right there on me. All right, so his name was Cy Mueller. He was a geology professor from Stanford, and he was simply out here doing some survey work when he stumbled upon this vertebrae right here. Now, being a geologist, he knew that he had something, but he wasn't quite sure what the heck he had, so he sent it to his colleague in Fallon. Her name was Margaret Wheat. She was a colleague of Dr. Camp's, and she sent it over to Camp, and he was the dean of like the paleontology department for UC Berkeley at the time. Says that is the largest bone of an ichthyosaur that I've ever seen. The guy was so excited. What's he do with it? Sets it on his desk for about 25 years. Then he came out here in 1954 when he did the excavation on this quarry and several other quarries through the park where they unearthed 37 creatures. Now, because this was sticking up out of the hillside, they actually knew what strata to dig for these guys. So they actually came in here with front-end loaders, dynamite, excavators, just to loosen the overburden. And it wasn't until they got a couple feet of the fossils that they start going down with like dental tools, paint brushes, and stuff of that nature. And that's when they go down 3 inches at a time. All right? And that's what takes so long. So as far as how long their field seasons were, we really don't know. But if you guys didn't imagine the weather today, imagine it in January or December. All right, so basically we think he was probably out here from like March to October or somewhere in that time frame. But how many hours a week he was working, we really don't know. You guys actually passed his house on the way up here. It's that house with the tree growing through it. That's now the bearing wall for that structure. Now, this building was originally designed to be an open-air building. It was never designed to be shut off to the general public. So like I briefly mentioned, the A-frame went over it in 1966. And then by the mid-80s, they came in here and they added all the center blocks in here. And then they used basically the fiberglass walls that capped the two ends off. When they did that, they were going to build another building right behind this gentleman. All right, right behind you. They were going to build this building right here. We got the foundation poured for it, and then basically the funding got diverted back to this building. If you noticed in that picture, it used to have wood shakes on it. Now it's got a metal roof on it. So that's basically what happened. So now you can only get in here when one of us is here. Any questions that I didn't cover? You guys are quiet. You ready for a quiz? If anybody wants any souvenirs, there is a small gift shop down there. I can take cash or check, but I know a couple of you are looking at that. And then anyone that showed up late, I can collect your tour fee, okay?
No,
They were like serrated, they just.
they were very sharp. Yeah, serrated, sharp.